Hey, coaches. Just want to start out by saying thank you very much for taking time to tune in to this discussion. Super excited seeing all the responses, all the information, and the feedback that we've gotten over the last week in regards to this topic, and just looking forward to the conversation and sharing some ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other in regards to match day warm up. So, just a quick kind of overlap of how it's going to go. We're going to, as most of you probably saw, we submitted the survey to provide some feedback on match day warm up, and so we're going to review some of that information to start out, and then we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into some other key principles and ideas around how to frame and how to structure a match day warm up. So, the thing I do want to emphasize as we go through this is keep in mind that I'm coming at this from the perspective of the strength and conditioning coach. I myself am a rugby coach, just like most of you. However, in some settings, in some team environments, I'm strictly responsible for strength and conditioning, and so that's the angle I'm coming from. I'm not here to say that you have to do this type of drill or run this type of attack or anything. You just keep in mind that the exercises that we might describe or discuss are going to be, they're going to be adjusted slightly to fit your team's style. Okay, your players and whatnot. So with that, we'll go ahead and get straight into it. So, the first question that we asked is how much of your warm up is player led versus coach led, and as you can see, a wide range of responses. Some saying as little as 10% is coach led. Some saying 100% coach led. Which has its pros and cons. Changing throughout the season is understandable from a contextual perspective. You might change certain drills or certain activities based on the way that you want to play this week or something like that. However, the general framework of the warm up should really stay the same. If you all of a sudden start adding or subtracting minutes from the warm up, it's starting to kind of mess with players' psyche a little bit, right? So, again, if I'm looking at this from a strength conditioning perspective, all of a sudden we get to testing day and we start throwing a bunch of new activities, new exercises that players haven't done before, or we start stretching it out or shortening it up. If a player is accustomed or used to being ready to go in 5 to 8 minutes, and now all of a sudden we're taking 12, we're taking 15, or opposite of that, we're taking less. Well, now it's starting to adjust with their mental preparation, right? Coach leads the timing. It's all led by coaches at the moment, 100% coach supervised, which might be slightly different than coach led. So a lot of the responses had multiple selections. Right? Not anybody or very few had only one response. So in this case, so many responses, so many coaches having access to assistant and or strength conditioning coaches is great, right? A few many hands make light work. Okay, that so few coaches are flying solo, so to speak. I think it was just around 10% of the responses is great, because I'm sure we've all been in that situation of having to wear many hats and be all over the place, and we know how hectic that can be, and really game day is supposed to be a lighter, easier day for us as coaches to be able to kind of see the fruits of our labor. How did we do planning and structuring the week in terms of preparation for the match? Right. So in terms of content, again, multiple selections here across the board. Obviously, most consistent was contact, patterns, physical preparation, skills. Again, I am coming at this from a strength S&C perspective. However, the fact that so few actually commit time to decision making is is a little bit concerning, right? And one of the trends you might see is coaches who don't include decision making intentionally. And then in the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of the game, players are uh, they're not switched on, right? They're making bad decisions, and then of course the coach jumps down their backside for it. So making sure that we incorporate ample opportunities for decision making, right? It shouldn't be all unopposed, because the match is not unopposed. So make sure that we're putting them under that time pressure, so they're getting that mental stimulus, as well as the physical. Total warm up time, as you can see, majority of the coaches are somewhere between 30 to 50 minutes, which is about on par. Now, what we don't see here is what that time consists of. Okay, I've certainly seen some coaches that the warm up might be 30 minutes, and it might be just a lot of jogging, a lot of walking. But I've seen 50-minute warm ups to where it's full speed. It's like another training session, stop, start, and tackling, and patterns and everything else. So we have to take this with a grain of salt. But for me, the big question marks here is around that 11% that is 50 plus minutes. What type of environment are you in? What type of climate? What type of field conditions? Um, what is it exactly that feels that 50 minutes, that you need to be out almost an hour before kickoff to actually be doing stuff, right? I mean, the game itself lasts 80 minutes. Ball in play of actual time of activity is going to be 30 to 35 minutes on average, and you're almost doubling that, just in your warm up. Right. Dead time again. We don't know how much of this, the context of this. Most coaches going 3 to 5 minutes, and if we look back at our previous slide, you know, if the average warm up is 30 to 40 minutes, right, and the typical break time is 3 to 5 minutes, does that really mean that the players are active for 25 to 35 minutes of an actual warm up? If so, what is that compiled of? What does that consist of? I mean, we'll go a little bit more in detail in terms of actual timings or run sheets of what that can look like. But again, personally, just a little kind of question mark, a little highlight around those points of, is that enough scheduled dead time to where players are inactive, they're able to catch their breath intentionally, right? Relax, rest, and prepare for whatever the next activity is. Okay. A few other details that were highlighted in the survey, some other feedback that we received, was around coaches including activation games, right? Kind of your more traditional laps around the field. Okay, circling the circling the wagons, I guess, if you call it that. How to manage kickers and their preparation, the timing of it. In my experience, kickers are have unique personalities. Definitely routine oriented folks, and so how do you give them what they need, but also make sure that they're not overcooking themselves? Okay, leaving time for mental preparation, or not leaving time, but even making sure that you incorporate it, that you include it in. Maybe it's a mental exercise that you do at the very beginning, so players kind of switch on and kind of walk through that next gate of, okay, now it's time to start prepping. Okay. Someone else mentioned saving contact for the last 5 minutes, and while I understand you don't necessarily need to go full contact very early, this is not a right or wrong kind of discussion, right? Just a thinking point is that I've been in situations to where, even if it's controlled, that the contact activities in the warm up might lead to, a little stinger, or it might, a previous injury might resurface for a player. Also been in situations to where the contact portion of the warm up actually took a player out of contention. And so, with that, I just kind of ask or challenge, is it better to save contact for the last 5 minutes, knowing that something like that could happen? Or do you want to move that contact point a little bit further up in the warm up? Because, say, for example, a player does, a shoulder pops out, they take a knee in the wrong, in the wrong spot, or something like that. How much time are you giving for not just that individual, but for the other players to kind of reset, right? For the substituting player that needs to now bump up to a starting role, for the the partner, the other center, the other flanker, who now needs to change his communication approach to the match, right? If I'm accustomed to playing next to one person, I know their tendencies. I know how I need to play to complement that. Finding out 3 minutes before kickoff that, hey, I've got to switch that. It's creating an opportunity for a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of uneasiness or uncertainty kind of going in, right? Just that quick change. Whereas if the contact is a little bit earlier, and um, if God forbid we do have to make a change like that, then at least you're giving everyone else on the team time to make that mental adjustment, right? If one of the players that's staying on, or the captain, can connect with the replacement player and say, okay, just remember your role, XYZ, that sort of stuff. Or maybe your decision makers can get together and kind of have a little powwow about how they need to adjust moving forward. So again, not right or wrong, just something to consider in terms of those worst case scenario situations. Right. So some key targets around the warm up. Again, this is from a GPS or athlete performance management perspective. Not everybody has access to the technology, but again, there's still ways that we can look for this, and we can try and measure it. So, in total, we want to be looking for 800 to 1200 meters max. All right, and that goes for that goes for 1 through 15 or 1 through 23. Right. Obviously, when you split into units, your forwards might be less active, right? Scrummaging, lineouts, mauls, etc. But your backs are running their strike moves, and so that gap is going to be a little bit broader. But again, just keeping this in mind and making sure that you try and manage the players' output, so they don't do too much too soon, right? 8 to 12 impacts, and the thing to keep in mind here, this is not 8 to 12 tackles. Okay, an impact could come from making a tackle, from clearing a ruck, from carrying into contact. For the forwards, it could be your scrum engagements. It could be, setting mauls or whatnot. And so you want to mitigate that, because again, some players might only make 10 to 12 impacts in a game, right? So there's no point in exposing them to so much stress even before the game starts, right? 5 to 10 decisions. Again, this is a very rough number here. And actually, thinking back, this is a little bit premature. Should be a bit higher, because when I did this, I just had, attacking decisions in mind, right? Do I pass? Do I hit the gap? Do I take into contact, etc.? But also your other decisions around defensive decisions. Am I the high hit or the low hit? Do I need to engage in the ruck? Do I need to stay out? Do I need to rotate? Do I need to pull someone with me? All of those are decisions that need to be played into that as well. And so, giving each individual the opportunity to get those decisions and those moments, those behaviors, is going to be key. Okay. And so, again, from a warm up perspective, making sure that they're seeing different pictures throughout the field, different moments that they're going to be exposed to in the match. Obviously, we're not going to be able to address every single one, but introduce them to multiple situations, so they're a bit more alert and they're starting to look for those opportunities. And then some key actions. So as a strength coach, right, this is where it's vitally important that you have a seat at the table with the rest of the coaching staff to understand what are the key actions they're trying to emphasize. Is there a certain technique, a certain philosophy in terms of taking the ball into contact, in terms of rotating on defense? Your kick chase, your line out phase play, whatever those key actions are, make sure that those are introduced and covered in the warm up. Okay, and that's where, as a strength conditioning coach, again, it's critical that I have those conversations with the coaching staff, and that I can incorporate them or schedule them into the warm up in the best way possible. So again, the players are maximally prepared for the upcoming competition. Okay. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into, what does the actual timing look like? All right. How do we schedule that time? Well, foremost, the primers is where you can really make some positive gains, positive advancement. I know, kind of aging myself, but back in the day of the sevens tournaments, especially at the higher the representative levels, it was always having the blowout sessions. Right, you're out there at at 6, 7 a.m. for a 9:30, 10 o'clock kickoff. And you're kind of running through a warm up and kind of getting the blood flowing before the competition. And where this really stems from is a lot of research around the idea of PAP, which is post activation potentiation, and that's a pretty fancy scientific term, but basically it's just saying that the activation being exposure to intense activity, and that could be partner resisted isometric work. It could be isometric holds, or heavier lifting. Could even be band resisted work, right? Access to resistance bands and those types of things. Even small doses of plyometrics, getting the muscles activated, warmed up, and getting them kind of moving and executing in the way that you want them to move in the game. So what that looks like is, maybe 15, 20 minutes of mobility and activation. And 20 minutes is certainly on the high end. I mean, in a lot of cases, 20 minutes is the whole primer session. Right. And then you might have 3 to 5 minutes of kind of a CNS or wake up activity. This could be, maybe one to two sprint efforts. It could be, some quick reactive stuff. Maybe it's quick hands playing a game with the ball. It could even be just like quick feet. If you think, not advocating for speed ladders by any means, but if you think about some of those quick footed drills, you could do something like that even online. And a lot of times we'll just do simple quick feet, forward and back over the line, side to side hops, those types of things. Again, just getting the mind prepared for, hey, the body needs to move fast before the game actually comes. And this is actually real key, especially for road games. Last thing you want players to do is roll out of bed, jump onto the bus, right? They're stiff, they're probably sore. They get on the bus, it's a 2, 3, 4 hour drive, they get off the bus, and then now they're starting to stretch and move for the first time, right? Whereas, one of these primer sessions gets the blood flowing a little bit. Yeah, they're still going to be sitting on the bus, but at least they're loosened up a little bit. They can do some extra mobility on the bus, during a pit stop, something like that, to stay loose, stay active. And then once they get to the game, right, their body is already a bit more prepared than had they just stepped off cold. in terms of the actual warm up itself, the whole routine, the whole schedule can start, again, typically 30, 40 minutes, start to finish, right? Now, uh, the you might schedule 30 minutes of activity, but you might start at 40 minutes prior to kickoff, right? Because obviously you want to leave time for getting back into the sheds or back in the locker room, changing, having that transition time. So again, you might have a 40-minute start, but you might only have 30 minutes of activity. Okay, and it's just something to keep in mind, and of course, we can go into more detail about that later. That's going to change from team to team or situation to situation. Out of that time, you're going to have 8, maybe 10 minutes of individual prep. That might be your traditional dynamic warm up, might be some speed development if you're outside backs, or more positional based stuff like your scrum profiles, line out lifting, things specific to your position. Right, kickers can go out maybe 5 to 8 minutes beforehand. Again, they're already going to have done their primer, their physical activation, so they shouldn't need that much more work in terms of preparing once they get on the field. So 5 to 8 minutes should give them enough time to kind of get the kicks they need. 5-6 kicks from the tee if they're kicking for points. A couple of drop kicks, a couple of kicks out of hand, that sort of thing. And of course they can cover a little bit of that once once everybody else finishes and is transitioning with their individual prep. All right, then 5 to 7 minutes for the units, and at this point right here, this is what I refer to as CFU. Right, this is check for understanding. Okay, there's no sense in trying to learn something new or refine something new. Everybody should know their role, know their positions. You're just kind of running through, making sure everyone understands their objectives, their jobs, and make sure, right, this is not an out and out sprint. It might be starters versus reserves, but you're going to take your time in between. You might run a rep, and then on the way back, the players are walking back into position, right, and they're checking in. Fly half with the inside center. Hey, let's just remember, this cue or this angle, or look for this key, this target. As we said, we want to walk back, so we want a little bit bigger work to rest ratio, just to make sure that they're getting their efforts in, but it's not a lot of volume, right? It's low density, right? Plenty of time in between each effort. Okay, and then maximum team warm up is going to be 13 to 15 minutes. That's going to include some water breaks in between. Okay, so here, obviously, during the individual, players can get water as much as they want, right? You're going to schedule a break for water in between for the units, right? And depending on the conditions, players might not want actual water, but it's still good to schedule that in, even just to bring players back together for that mental trigger of, okay, we're transitioning to the next phase. Right, they can come back together, and I might not be getting water, but I can still check in and be like, hey, really looking forward to this. Let's make sure to key on this guy, or whatever it is. It's just another touch point for the players, right? It's not an opportunity. Hey, I don't want water. I'm just going to stay out and be on my own. Come back together as a team, and then we make that transition together. And then for the team warm up, it's full speed. Right, check for understanding. If they need to jog through it, if they want to jog through it, just to make sure we all understand, hey, that's fine. But when we get to team warm up, right, it's full bore. Right, there's no holding back. We're starting to prepare for how we want to play. Right, and think about this in terms of again, if we make the comparison to a weight room session. Right, this 8 to 10 minutes is like your movement, your mobility. Your 5 to 7 minutes here, that's like your prep work. Okay, you're starting to increase the weight on the bar, but when you get to when you get to the team warm up, I mean, that's where you're starting to reach your max, right? And so you got to start preparing for all that weight that you're about to shoulder for your test rep. Okay. So what that team warm up would look like. Okay. Again, everything is going to be short and sharp, but you're going to control the intensity by how big the channels are, how big the gaps are. So as you can see here, catch, pass, some of the skill work, right? You're working with a 5 to 8 meter gap to keep it short, right? And again, the speed here is going to be on the speed of execution, not necessarily the speed of my running. Okay. So we need that ball moving through quickly. And yeah, there's probably going to be mistakes, but guess what? There's going to be mistakes in the game as well. Okay. Now, I leave a minute and a half for decision making, just because the rotation does kind of take a little bit more time. And this is going to be dependent upon, what is your activity that you're using. Are you doing a 3v2, a 4v5, or 5v4? Whatever it is, that's gonna change. It's gonna look a little bit different. Okay, but again, right, that minute and a half, it could be a little bit shorter. Maybe you don't need that much time. Maybe whatever activity you're doing, you need to stretch it out to 2 minutes. Okay, then a minute and a half for shape or structure. Right, this is where if you have a pod system, you're getting a group of forwards kind of linking in with the backs a little bit. Now, I mean, this could change, but again, you're kind of breaking down the system into smaller groups, right? This isn't necessarily a full team attack or anything like that. We'll go over that in a second. Then, as I said before, structuring in that minute for water. Again, depending on the climate, the weather, the individual, they might not necessarily need water. But again, it's just that built-in transition of, okay, now we're shifting to the next bit. We're turning the page, right, to the next activity. So defensive technique, this could be tackle tracking, could be actually finishing the tackle, hitting pads, whatever it is. But again, we only keep it at a minute, right? Small space. So we minimize not just the running, but also the impact of the contact. Okay. And we're breaking down that skill into kind of micro activities, right? So again, the technical piece of it could vary or will vary based on how you coach or what your team is emphasizing. But again, keeping the timing short, coaching should be minimal if at all. Right? Players should be able to understand what mistakes they're making, how to correct them, and that sort of thing. But again, the the kryptonite to a warm up is coaches coming in and having group discussions and group group rallies over this technique or that technique. At this point, you got to let the boys play, right? So then you can transition to smaller stuff, right? We're starting to kind of build up on the defensive side. So we get into units. Maybe this is 3 or 5 man units, and they're working on maybe defensive decision making. Am I hitting high? Am I getting into the ruck, staying out? That sort of thing. Again, the space is controlled, so we're not getting very intense accelerations. But again, just focusing on those smaller skills. And then you can get into, some larger units, defensive shape, systems, that sort of thing, how you're rotating around rucks, how you want to, if you run a hinge defense or something like that, create those scenarios. Another built-in water break, 2 minutes for units. And this unit piece right here, this is full bore, right? This is full go. As we said before, it's kind of a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio, right? Backs might be doing a launch move with the second phase. Okay, you're jogging back into place, bam, getting another one. At 2 minutes, you're probably looking at 3, maybe 4 shots. Okay, if you're the forwards, you might have time for let's say 2 lineouts and 2 scrum engagements, or 3 lineouts and 1 scrum engagement, or something like that, depending on how quick your players rotate. Okay, but again, this is it's game speed right here. So you want high intensity, but you don't want a lot of volume, which is why we keep the time short. Then we finish off with 3 minutes of team, right? And you can, coaches can divide this however you want. It's basically 3 minutes with what you want. If you want to do 3 minutes of team attack, by all means, go for it. If you want to split 90 seconds attack and defense, hey, great. But, at the 3 minute mark, I'm blowing the whistle, I'm pulling the players off, and we're going, right? So just say 15 minutes total minus your 3 minute water breaks. So 12 minutes of scheduled activity time, which, by the time you factor in rotations and cycling and whatnot, I mean, a player's probably only going, maybe 7-8 minutes of actual activity, if that. Okay. So when to lead and when to follow. If you're a fan of Fergus Conley, his book, The Game Changer, this is something that we're all very familiar with. Fergus, refers to this concept as the 4 coactives, which is the technical, tactical, physical, and mental preparation of the individual. And the reason I harp so much on the timing of it is because that we as coaches, when we get to game day, we have to understand that, and we have to keep in mind that, it's the mental and the tactical piece that we're preparing for as well, not just the physical and technical. That if we're stopping the warm-up routine to, try and teach tackle technique or passing technique or something, that now we're blocking their ability to tactically and psychologically prepare as well. All right, that they have to be able to overcome those mistakes, those errors, on the fly, and quickly transition to the next one. And if we as coaches are there stopping every single time there's a mistake, or, as I said, having these team huddles every minute, we're blocking the other preparation strategies, or coactives, as Fergus refers to them, for the player to optimally prepare. A few other things to remember as well is know the goal and know our role. All right. Anybody else that's the former WWE wrestling fans, just had to throw that one in there. But we have to understand that, come game day, we have to understand what it is that we're preparing them for. And yeah, tackle technique might be incorrect, but you're not going to fix it that 30 minutes or 20 minutes before the game. Right? Understand that our role on game day is to prepare them for everything that they're going to be exposed to in the match. Right? And as we've said before, if you liken this to strength and conditioning, right? If you're preparing for your squat max, and all of a sudden in your warm-up reps, I'm stopping and trying to change your technique, and hey, turn your foot here and widen your stance there, and right now your mind is drifting off from the task at hand. You're starting to focus. You can on your foot position, on how uncomfortable this new setup is. All right, it's going to completely just block your mental preparation for I'm moving some pretty flipping heavy weight. And so we need to understand that going into the game as well. Right? Don't play the game before the game, as we talked about with the warm-up duration. Some coaches, especially if you're out, 40 plus minutes before the match, certainly been in situations where teams will cover, 2.5. I mean, help us if there's 3 kilometers, 3,000 meters covered in the pregame warm-up. For your type 5, for your forwards, I mean, that's an entire match in a lot of cases, right? And so you got to think about the warm-up as, or game day as, hey, I've only got so many meters in the bank. I've only got so many dollars in the bank. And how do I want to withdraw from that account, right? I want to make smart withdrawals and make sure that I'm saving up enough for when it's actually needed, which is once the first whistle blows, right? And lastly, make sure that you're on a time check, right? Understand that, or understand what time is the actual kickoff. Are we doing anthems and those types of things? Make sure that you're not finishing too soon, right? I've seen, certainly observed teams that, they start the warm up an hour before kickoff. They finish 15 minutes before, and now players start, picking daisies, so to speak, right? They start getting on their phones, and, their minds are just kind of wandering a little bit. And now you've got to try and rein them back in. At the same time, coaches that might extend, maybe you miscalculate, mismanage, whatever. Now there's a little bit of a rush, right? And this guy, somebody moved his scrum cap or can't find his mouth guard or something. Now there's all this extra anxiety going into the match that, quite frankly, didn't have to be there. All right, so again, one of the reasons why, in my role as a strength coach, I get um, so locked and loaded on the times to make sure that we're not, herding players off the field and rushing them out of the locker room, that they have time to, go to the bathroom or get that last minute snack if they need it. Okay. So with all that, understand that not everybody has access to a strength coach that can be there on game day. Maybe you're one of the coaches that wears all your hats. And so what I wanted to share with everyone this evening is just a new program that I'm getting ready to roll out this fall. It's the kilograms kilometer package, to where I'm offering to work with you as the coach and your teams to basically, provide that strength conditioning guidance. I'm not sitting there telling you how to coach, but I, want to work with you and the teams, or the coaches and the staff and the players to make sure that they're maximizing the strength and conditioning work. So, what that would include is weekly group chats on strength and conditioning. Chatting with players about their recovery processes, their speed and conditioning work, what they can do outside of training to be maximizing, their weight workouts, etc. Chatting with the coaches on, just what we talked about tonight. Hey, how can you schedule and arrange your team practices, your team trainings to maximize the conditioning aspect, right? Almost get players fitter without doing quote unquote conditioning sessions, right? Then with that, also offering those teams and those programs all of the 12 high performance resources, right? So that's the athlete manual that goes deeper into each of the habits, the importance, right? The strategies, and then some examples of how players can implement them into their daily routines. And then also individual meetings or strategy sessions with each player, right? Because obviously, a prop is going to be different than a outside center, etc. So, chatting to them about how they can maximize their training for their position specifically, and how they can adjust their workouts for their development and for their position. And then, as always, certainly welcome everyone to stay connected on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have our daily post highlighting one of our high performance habits, as well as some other tips, strategies, and techniques around workouts and strength conditioning. Our YouTube channel, which has over 200 instructional videos, exercise demos, our segment that we call our 90 seconds of knowledge, which covers it's just short clips on different topics, right? It might be a 90-second explanation of a certain exercise, or 90 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes of, diving deeper into certain concepts like nutrition, recovery, power, explosive work, etc. Or at the very bottom, you can sign up for the Sign up for our newsletter, goes out 3 times a week, highlights one of our high performance habits, highlights a move better, train better movement, whether it's mobility, flexibility, or strength work, and then also shares a sample workout during the third email for the week. And of course, at the very top, email if you want to reach out directly, stay in touch, or have questions coming up in the future. So again, that's it for our discussion on what's in the warm up. As I said at the beginning, thank each and every one of you for tuning in and following along, for all your feedback and input. And if there's any other questions that you think of, or any ways that I can help you and your teams in the future, then feel free to reach out. And I'm all about, super excited about any opportunities to help you create some training strategies to maximize your performance.